Hello and welcome back to the Sheldon Show. So last time I was talking about cognitive deficit thinking as part of an ongoing series that I just started, which has to do with how you can live a better life. So for today, I want to talk about why is it that you need to love yourself. I want to talk about self-acceptance and really what that is. And then I also want to talk about self-worth, because I think those three things are critical when it comes to living a better life. You've got to, obviously you have to love yourself, right? I don't think anyone can love yourself as much as you can do that. And that is critical. And then self-acceptance, right? There's just some things you need to accept, but there's a difference between acceptance and settling. And so I'm going to talk about that as well. And then self-worth, right? I mean, in your opinion, what are you really worth? And do you put a price tag on that? And should you even do such a thing? I don't think you could ever put a price tag on life. And a lot of that is reflected in the decisions that we make. So let me start off, and I have my notes with me. So the first thing I want to go over is this idea of having love for yourself. And really, what is that? Well, to me, loving yourself is reflected in the way you live your life, right? If you love yourself, there's some things you just would not expose yourself to. They're just some things that you will not do. You know, a lot of people say, well, yes, I love myself. But then you look at some of the decisions that they make, and then you have to really question, well, do you really love yourself? Because if you love yourself, I feel like there are just some things that you will not put yourself through. And a lot of people struggle too with this whole idea of loving themselves. Specifically, I can give you an example. I work with a lot of people in the drug addiction area, so to speak. And I do a lot of, I guess you could say a little bit of counseling, life coaching / everything. And one of the things that I realize someone who's made a lot of mistakes in their life are struggling with is guilt. And what guilt does is that it makes you feel so bad, so sorry, which is a good thing to have a conscience and to feel sorry and bad about things that you've done. But a lot of times it just becomes this real type of thing that gets into someone, and they're not able to see beyond the guilt. They're not able to see beyond the things that they've done. And so they develop this, and that goes back to what I was talking in my last video, that's cognitive deficit thinking. They develop this way of looking at themselves in a very negative way. And so they're not quite able to love themselves. And then if you don't love yourself, then you're liable to just do anything, right? And not worry necessarily a lot of times about the consequences, because you have the mentality that, well, perhaps I don't deserve this, or I don't deserve that, or I don't deserve to be happy. I've heard people say, I don't deserve to be happy. Well, if you are of the mindset that you don't deserve to be happy, then you're probably never going to be happy, right? So loving yourself is critical, it's crucial, it's something that you have to do. But I think immediately attached to that is the idea of self-worth. So loving yourself goes directly with self-worth, because if you don't feel like you are worthy of happiness, if you don't feel like you're worthy of whatever, then it's very difficult to love yourself. And usually that's where it breaks down. You don't feel like you're worthy, so then you don't love yourself. So self-worth is really critical. Now, I just want to read through a couple things. A couple words. Self-worth is the level of respect and dignity that someone has for themselves. So the level of respect. So do you respect yourself? And that is reflected in the way you walk, the way you talk, the way you dress, the way you handle stuff at work, the way you go to work. It is reflected in everything. Do you respect yourself? Do you carry yourself in such a way that says, I am someone to be respected? Or are you someone who is trying to get respect by telling people they should respect you? And it doesn't work like that. You have to be someone who carries themselves in such a way that people say this is someone to respect. Dignity goes with pride, right? I think dignity goes with pride a lot. Do you have dignity? Are you very prideful of who you are? Do you stand for anything, right? Do you believe that you deserve good things in life? All those things are self-worth. Do you have a favorable opinion of yourself as well? Or are you always just beating up yourself? And, you know, just again, going back to CDT, cognitive deficit thinking, and you're always beating up yourself. If you're always beating up yourself in a negative way, self-criticism is good, but it can get really bad if it becomes self-denigration, right? And self-denigration is someone who criticizes themselves so much for perhaps one thing that happens that they forget that they can actually do things that are good. So what you don't want is self-denigration, which is to beat yourself up too much to the point where you almost don't feel like you can do anything good. Self-criticism is okay, right? So that's self-worth. And then there's self-acceptance, the final part to this. Now, acceptance doesn't mean settling, right? So I've done a couple interviews before, and I encourage you to go back and watching them. And two that come to mind is the interview I did with someone who's transgender. And this is someone who accepted after a while, you know, this is who I am. They accept the fact that they are transgender. Or the guy who is, you know, he's religious, he's in church, and he accepted the fact that he is gay. I think when people accept who they are, life becomes a whole lot easier. Because life is difficult as it is already. And if you're struggling mentally with, you know, am I this, am I that, am I this, am I that, then that whole idea of reality then just starts to just completely become a mess. Because you have no idea of who you are, and then you struggle. It's like you have multiple personalities, and so self-acceptance is key, but acceptance is not settling. Accepting is you realize that this is who you are, right? And therefore this is perhaps the life that you should be living. Settling is when you know you could do better, right? But you decide, well, maybe this is all I deserve. Now there's completely different, a complete difference there between acceptance and settling, right? Settling is you saying this is maybe all I deserve, and that is not what I'm saying when I say acceptance. So you accept who you are, you accept, you know, this is who I am as a person, and I pointed to those two examples of interviews that I've done before, people who've accepted who they are and know they can live their truth, right? When you accept who you are, you can then live your truth. But you can't live your truth if you're not accepting who you are. And settling is something completely different, so don't get those confused. So, key is love yourself, right? You have to love yourself. No one can love you the way you can do it. You just got to do it. Acceptance, you have to accept who you are, and the moment you accept who you are, life becomes easier. Life is difficult, but it can become easier when you finally realize, like, this is who I am and this is where I'm going to live my life. And the thing about acceptance as well is you've got to remember that not everyone is going to accept you for what, you know, accept you the way you are. What is more important is that you accept yourself for who you are, and you can't be too concerned about what people have to say. You know, I have a philosophy that I kind of roll with. You know, I don't mind giving you a seat at the table, but I don't mind listening to what you have to say, but I don't have to adhere to what you say, right? So you could have a seat at the table, you can say what you want to say constructively, but I don't necessarily have to do as you say. At the end of the day, I have my own mind. This is my life, and you decide to live your life a certain way. And you gotta be okay with the fact that not everyone is gonna like you for you. People are gonna be critical. It's the world that we live in, and you just gotta be okay with that. But what's more important is that you accept yourself, and then your worth. realize that you can't put a price tag on your life. That life is precious, and so you have to realize your self-worth. And there's one more thing I want to touch on with that is when you realize your true worth, you set boundaries, right? When you realize your true worth, you set boundaries. And let me explain what I mean by that. In terms of, for example, for relationships, you're not going to date certain people. You're not going to have certain people inside of your life if you realize your true worth. Now, it is not that you are better than someone else. It is just that someone is not living the kind of life that you would like to live, the kind of life that you see yourself like to live, that you see yourself wanting to live. So you set boundaries. And you set boundaries because if you don't, people are going to run over you. You need to set boundaries. You need to be able to say no, right? So that's where boundaries come in. So when you realize, hey, this is me, I love myself, I accept myself, this is who I am, I have self-worth, and then you draw those boundary lines, then perhaps you're less likely to have to deal with certain types of things in your life. So again, love yourself, self-acceptance, and self-worth, and set boundaries, right? That's what I wanted to go over with you today. So don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to leave your comments so that I would be able to read your comments and respond to them, and maybe do a follow-up to this if there's something that you perhaps maybe don't quite agree with me. It's okay, just post it, and then we could talk about it. We may not agree on everything, and that's quite okay as well, right? But we could still talk about things. So looking forward to your feedback. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you for the next part of how to live a good life. Thank you, and I'll see you again.